Welcome, movie fans. Thanks for joining us for episode 86 of Reading Between the Reels, the premiere podcast of Simply Walking into Mordor. If you're a new listener, we're glad you found us, and if you've been enjoying the show, please tell someone about us, please. On X or Facebook, write a review on your favorite podcast catcher, or just recommend the show to a friend. I'm Justin Eldon, and I'm joined by Corey Heitschmidt and Craig Dickinson. How's it going?
Yes, it's going well. It's going great. Really excited about the show. Corey, how are you doing?
I'm good. I was muted for a second. Sorry.
Yes.
You didn't get to hear my golem, my precious, but...
Today on the show, we also have a good friend, fellow teacher, and huge Lord of the Rings fan, Andrew Clark. Andrew, how are you?
That was the greatest intro, Justin Eldon. You have a voice and a face for radio.
Wow. So now that you commented / made fun of my intro, I feel like I have to bring up the fact that I actually went through many versions of that intro. Craig helped me,
That was a compliment. That was
brainstorm
a
it.
No.
No. So the other one was premiere podcast of Second Breakfast.
Second breakfast.
The other one was premiere podcast of Simping for the Elf Queen.
Ooh.
I
like
know
that
that
one.
was appropriate.
Oh.
But I said it anyway, and then I had another one. I don't remember.
I mean, they're all golden.
Well, we decided to go with a podcast of Simply Walking into Mordor.
I like it.
Yeah.
Do not take him for some podcaster of cheap tricks.
So as many of you can tell, maybe we should have said this earlier, but we are doing Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, the extended version, the best and only version that should exist. And that's what we are going over tonight. So,
Yes.
let's get started.
Yeah. So we're going to start, as we always do, with our overall thoughts on the film. And so, Andrew, since you're the guest, I'm going to ask you to say, just what are your overall thoughts on the movie, Fellowship of the Ring?
Oh. Well, thank you, Craig. Craig, if I may. Thank you for having me. Overall thoughts. This is the greatest trilogy of all time, and Fellowship of the Ring is the best movie of the trilogy. So, is it the best movie of all time? I don't know, but it's high up there. It is the pinnacle of cinematography. Watching the trilogy on the big screen when it came out as a child was life-changing for me. And the Fellowship of the Ring is amazing because it has all the genres of film within it. It has action, adventure, romance, horror, and drama. So it's got everything you need.
That sounds a little bit like when I ask my daughter what her favorite color is, and she's like, rainbow. I love this movie because it has all the genres.
It does.
It does.
It does, though.
You're not wrong.
Unique of the three.
You're right.
The other Two Towers and Return of the King, are very much action adventures, and this movie has it all.
That is a solid argument.
Yep. Corey, why don't you jump in next? What are your overall thoughts?
All right. Well, I agree with Andrew. I believe this is probably, I would say this ranks above Star Wars to me. I think Star Wars is, people throw that out there, hold the title. Star Wars is going off nostalgia. I think this is an epic tale from start to finish. And I'm not just talking start to finish a Fellowship. I'm talking the whole trilogy. I agree. This may be, I was racking my brain trying to think of other trilogies that could be top one over this. Star Wars I put down lower. The storytelling in Star Wars is great, but not like this. I mean, the way they build this entire world, we're going to get to this, Craig. I know it. I'm jumping in the thunder here, but the world building, the character, the acting, I mean, Gollum, every single person in this movie, the CGI holds up today, makes this an amazing tale. And here's my overall take though, because we were talking about this, getting ready to prep for the show. We were watching, was it Siskel or Ebert? Which one was that guy? Was critiquing the show.
It was Ebert and then whoever
And Roper
replaced him.
Ebert and Roper back in 2001 were talking about this movie, and they were trashing on the movie. They called it, a silly ring. and the movie was 3 hours, and who's going to sit for a 3-hour movie? And I'm going to tell you what, they were saying, oh, well, the people who love it will love it. And I was blown away because I think this is a perfect example of one of those movies. It comes out, there's a few negative reviews by reviewers and these people who are supposed movie critics. But then you get down the road and you see the end of the whole trilogy, the story building, the arc, and the characters and where they go and what they become. And you look and you say, from start to finish, this was an amazing, epic tale that just you can't match this today. I don't even think you could make this movie today. I don't think this movie could be done like it was in 2001, the early 2000s. I don't think they could make this movie. There would be too much of the current writing stuff, which throws too many things in. I think that might show up in their Prime Video of Lord of the Rings stuff, where it's just got different agendas and different stuff pushed into it, which waters the story down. So I think this movie was a perfect time, a perfect place, and is perfect 3 movies.
You are absolutely correct, Corey. It would not be made today. It's amazing.
So,
yeah.
The whole time I was watching this movie, the phrase that kept coming to mind was like fine wine. Like, this movie was amazing when it came out, and I feel like every time I watch it, it gets better. And with the exception of like a couple of CGI moments, all of it holds up incredibly well.
Oh,
At some point, I remember being like, okay, there's a lot of slow motion. We need to like cool it. But that's like a very, very minor critique. But kind of like what Corey was saying, the movie came out and it got a couple of negative reviews. I actually spent a long time in preparation for this watching the reviews that people had of this movie when it came out. And I was surprised to hear negative reviews. I always thought this movie was like universally loved. But I think most of the negativity comes from people were just not used to this type of film where it is not a self-contained story. It does end on a cliffhanger. It is really long. There's a lot of dialogue. And it wasn't for, I think, the audience at the time, and it kind of set the bar. It moved the goalposts, I think, entirely for what an epic film is. Like, now, if a film is under 2 hours, we're almost just like, wait, what? Like, that was short. We expect longer movies, and I think Lord of the Rings has a lot to do with it.
Back then, movies I don't think were this 3-hour tale. I think that was a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a 3-hour movie is not a big deal. I'll go watch a 3-hour movie and not blink twice about it.
I kind of feel like I wasted my money if it's not like at least 2.5.
Yeah.
I felt offended during Batman when they gave an intermission for a 3-hour movie. I don't need an intermission for a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
See, no, I'm going to disagree there. I think movies should be longer and have more intermissions. 1, I have to go to the bathroom. And 2, they would sell more concessions if there were more intermissions.
Yes,
I don't understand why they don't
push
get that.
less. You're going to get less showings, though, which is part of the pushback, too. You can squeeze less showings into the day.
Justin, you're going to go to the bathroom if there's an intermission or not. So I don't need an intermission. You're going to go either way twice.
I haven't peed on a movie theater floor in quite some time, Andrew.
Okay. All right.
Oh, secrets are out.
So I'm gonna push back a little bit on the length that they all need to be 3 hours, because we recently did Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I will remind you is under 2 and feels just as full as any movie that comes out of 3 hours. Most times 3-hour movies are, most of the time, not this one. This is one of the exclusions. I think a lot of people did not learn the right lessons from this. Like, this is actually that's extended to like 3.5 hours, 3 hours and 40 minutes. And all of it deserved, right? There's a lot of 3-hour movies. There's a lot of padded runtime a lot of times. So I don't necessarily, length isn't necessarily better. I think better is better. Kind of like essays, kids. But yeah, to talk about what you guys said earlier, that this movie could be made today. This movie, like, I'm just looking at the budget, for instance, $93 million for the budget.
What?
Yeah. Easily, like, they're going to spend 3 times that to try to make a movie like this at this point.
I don't think they Fellowship or all 3.
That's just for Fellowship, and I know they're filming them concurrently, so those numbers are a little bit weird. But even still, you're going to get, even if it's 3 times that for the 3 movies. I mean, you're still looking at less than $400 million for.
Well, think of the gamble
11 hours
too,
of film.
Like, a studio, I don't feel like would do that today gamble on that and film all three concurrently without knowing that there's going to be a box office return.
Yeah, when there was a push for that, I remember hearing like they wanted it to be 2 movies. Can we just do 1 movie and a lot of that? So yeah, it absolutely was a gamble. And New Line was not that big of a studio at the time. Like this, it did. Like I love that somebody said, move the goalposts. I think that's a really apt description for this. And then of course, like being, Justin, I love what you said too about we look back at it, and we think it was universally acclaimed, which is odd to think that it wasn't.
Yes,
especially because like it was nominated for 13 Academy Awards, won 4 of them, one of which for cinematography, as Andrew pointed out. Yeah, so best cinematography, best visual effects, best makeup, best original score, which we'll talk about. The score is amazing. Also nominated for best picture, best art direction, best director, best editing, best original song, and costume design, and adapted screenplay, which I think is another thing that kind of gets lost in this, is that yes, Peter Jackson is a very accomplished filmmaker. Kudos there, absolutely 100%. Setting that aside, like this is Tolkien's novel, so like a lot of that credit needs to also be like, yes, the world building, it was there. He adapted it, which is amazing that he was able to do that. I think they're 2 very separate things. Like the story is amazing because it was that novel, but adapting that massive novel is a whole other thing. And how that didn't win this adapted screenplay is beyond me.
I do feel like it opens an entirely new can of worms, though, when you are adapting a novel, because you already have a built-in fan base. And in 2001, fan bases aren't like what they were today because the internet wasn't as prevalent. But you have like this built-in fan base that you run the risk of upsetting or alienating quite a bit.
Yep.
And I think for the most part, most of the changes that Peter Jackson made have been pretty universally praised. I know there's a couple that people don't like, but yeah, I mean, film adaptations don't always go well, and
that's true too.
He pulled it off.
But I think some of that is just a hardcore fan base that can't get on the board and say, not everything that looks good in my mind and in a book fits on a screen in the same way. It doesn't hit the same. It doesn't feel the same. It's great in writing. It's terrible in vision. Like you just can't draw that. So there always has to be changes. I think Peter Jackson did this story justice. I absolutely feel like Tolkien, if he'd walked out and walked into this theater and bought a ticket and went and sat and through it, that guy would have been pleased with what he got on a product here.
Yeah.
I think the shots are amazing. I mean, everything from this, from all 3, even into the Hobbit movies, which I like.
I love those movies.
So I was, I'll jump in here. I was, 12 years old when Fellowship came out in 2001. It was totally life-changing. And full disclosure, I was not a Tolkien fan. Like, I never read the books before I saw the movies. So Peter Jackson's interpretation brought in, I would say, millions of fans. I don't have any numbers, but I would say tons of people became Lord of the Rings fans because of Peter Jackson's movies. I'm one of them. I didn't read them until after I saw The Fellowship, and then I read the books. And yeah, there's a lot of deviations, but I think Peter Jackson, in his famous interview where he said we didn't want to take anything away from Tolkien, I think he achieved that. And if you watch the 70s animated film, I think Jackson borrowed a lot of stuff from that. Not a lot, like a couple scenes, several scenes, but I think he definitely did it justice, and it's hilarious because Christopher Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien's son, was like, yeah, the movies, they're not that great, but then Simon, the grandson, came out, and the fan base very much loves Christopher for gatekeeping J.R.R. Tolkien's works, and Simon, the grandson, kind of comes along and is kind of looking for a profit. Simon was like, oh, I don't think Peter Jackson was, I think he was too loyal to the books. I think he should have deviated even more. And the hardcore people are like, no, he deviated way too much.
Yeah, give me some Tom Bombadil in there. I'm just kidding. I don't want that.
And all the songs too, right? Yeah, just to kind of build off what you said too, Andrew, like a little bit older than you, but I did not read those books as a kid either. I didn't read them until until right before the movies came out. And I rushed through the trilogy just because I wanted to have that experience. But I think I missed a ton. And so seeing this movie, especially even just the beginning, which we'll get to, with the opening narration, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense now. I'm going to now need to go back and read the book again. And it only inspired that love of this of the books too. So I love both. I love the movies and the books. And yes, they're different animals, different versions of the story. There's clearly a lot more in the books. But yes, the same thing for me. It was like, yes, the movie makes me like the book more.
See, and I think that's the problem right there with Ebert's movie review, is I think people went into this movie in the beginning of this Fellowship, and this is a 3 hour and 48 movie, 3 hours, 48 minute movie. It takes a long, slow build on a lot of things. There's a lot that could edit out. You got sweeping panoramic shots that could easily be condensed down to 10 seconds instead of a minute.
I love those.
Right.
Me too.
But I think what happens is this movie is so deep in a world building in the Fellowship. That's what makes this movie stand out from the other two. This movie has, when you jump in, you're not jumping in at the beginning of the tale. You really aren't. You're jumping in midstream, and you, as a viewer who's new to Tolkien, because I never read the books, you have to figure out, one, and I still don't even know who the orcs are, where they're coming from, the Uruk-hai. Like, you're jumping in, and people are confused because they're like, wait, who are these guys? Where'd they come from? Why are they digging up those bodies? They're all questions that you just have to accept and move forward with. And back in 2001, and I think up till now, people want to be spoon-fed a quick story and a quick tale and then jump into the character building. But I think this is, you jumped in midstream. You were like, I'm in the Shire, and then next thing I know, I got some orcs looking at me like with maggoty teeth and trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And so people were a little jolted jumping in midstream. But when you get to the Two Towers and Return of the King, you feel more grounded. You've got some experience. You know who the main key players are. Now you can build their characters.
Yep.
See, I don't know if I fully agree with that, because I feel like the books came out so long ago that so much of like Tolkien's idea of what fantasy is had just kind of permeated the culture. Like you see little drops and drizzles of that everywhere, like in every fantasy film, where you have a general idea of like what orcs are, and you have a general idea of what dwarves are and elves, and you have a general idea of all this stuff. So I don't know, at least when I first saw it, I didn't feel completely thrown in. I didn't read the book until after I saw the movie. I felt like I had some idea of who elves were and who orcs were, and I didn't necessarily need that explained to me.
Yeah.
But this might be the part time to bring up that, again, we're not the normies.
Yes.
So.
Well, as Corey said about the orcs, like a lot of the stuff that Tolkien wrote is deliberately nuanced, so we don't really know, and that's kind of the beauty of it, is because I think piggybacking off of what Corey said about how everything is, they hold your hand through everything now. You need origin stories, and you need all kinds of explanations, but Tolkien's famous for being like, I don't know, and that's kind of where the love of it comes, is because they're so open to interpretation.
In the words of Wade Wilson, well, that's just lazy writing.
I don't think anyone can accuse him of being lazy.
He's definitely not lazy. Building his own languages and whatnot. Okay,
no.
Let's dig into this. Let's dig into cinematography. So I'm going to hit up Justin first. What did you notice for this film this time? Composition, color, camera work?
Just a ridiculous amount. Like I don't even know where to start here. Yeah. The extreme differences in when we talk about world building, the extreme differences in colors between when you go to Mordor, when you go to like the Shire. Like you're in Mordor for the prologue, and you see that whole battle, and you see the ring almost being destroyed, and then you go to the Shire, like this happy, bright, green place with not colorful. Like the houses aren't necessarily colorful, but they're not muted. Like they're somewhere in between. They are not Mordor. And then you go from that to just like green rolling hills to just this happy, peaceful place. Like it's almost so jarring to contrast those two right at the beginning of the film. And then just throughout the entire movie, the number, I started counting and then I stopped because it was too many. The number of wide shots to like establish the land and just the vastness of Middle Earth or New Zealand, it's amazing. And I don't know how many of those, maybe one of you can tell me, how many of those like structures are actually CGI'd in, or if any of them were real, I'm not sure. But the first establishing shot of the Fellowship right after they leave Rivendell. They're walking kind of on a hill, and
that's
there
CGI.
That's CGI. Okay, I don't know the history of New Zealand, so I wasn't sure like if there were any like old ruins there. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's almost overwhelming because you completely like you are so engulfed in this epic tale. Like it sucks you right in. At no point do you feel like they're on a set or they're. It felt authentic all throughout.
Corey, what about you?
Just a couple things. I think there's a lot of camera movement where it's panning and zooming always, and it's a sweeping motion, and it's never just like a quick shot to a quick person. There's always the tail, like it builds the scene. You see the scenery behind, and it sweeps to the character. You know what I mean? And so in doing that, it's kind of like the world is as important as the character, where we're at, where the location is, the scenery behind. I cannot believe it's a $93 million budget because I feel like this could not have just been green screen. All of this. There's just no way. The stuff they must have built, either they went through a ton of styrofoam or I mean the artistry on it. And to do that, to fit that into a camera and sweep across it for a split second to go to a character and a story is amazing. Everything is contrasted. The orcs are dark and dirty and rusty and gross. And I mean, I can only imagine they smell. Gimli even does it when one lands on him. He gives it a little sniff test and you can tell. I think the best shot of all the things that I saw, the one shot that stands to my head and looks and says, this is camera work. And I swear they took this right out of Highlander, which is a podcast that we talked about before. You should go check that out. There's a sweeping drone-like motion where it's this, honestly, it's drone footage before drone footage was invented. This is when he does the first panning of the orc mines and the moth that goes up to Gandalf. And as this drone view dives down into the orc mines at Saruman's palace. Isengard. Yeah, as it dives down in there and we go past orcs and they're moving everywhere. There's characters moving. I mean, the computer graphics on this are amazing. And they're working over here in metals. So over here, they're digging up more orc bodies. And over here, they're cutting trees and dropping them down. And then it goes to this moth flying around and it goes up to the top of Isengard. And here's Gandalf, just having been defeated and grabs the moth, whispers to it, and it flies off. And it's such an amazing sweeping one shot. And it reminded me of the Highlander arena fight take. I mean, where it was just this amazing camera footage that honestly looked today, you'd go, oh man, that was a great drone, whoever did that. Back then, they didn't have that drone. So however they did this was amazing.
Yeah. Andrew, I'm going to give you a chance to jump in here. Do you have anything specific that you want to talk about? Cinematography, color, camera?
I have a lot to say about those topics.
Go for it.
Mostly camera work. So, going back to what Corey said in his intro, the CGI holds up. Justin, I think, mentioned CGI. I would agree for the most part. Like, Peter Jackson was a master at using CGI sparingly, which is what it should be, in the background.
Like he uses it to like enhance shots, not create shots all the time.
Yes,
which is nice.
Right. So that's my biggest. Like I was saying before, if I were to just review this movie, it would be nothing but praise. So I was trying to specifically think of critiques, and I would say the cave troll in Balin's tomb CGI, it's a bit questionable, but that's like my only CGI critique, really.
I feel so bad for that cave troll.
Right. But in terms of the camera work, I paid special attention to close-ups when I was rewatching it. And the vast majority of exposition comes from Gandalf. He's our lore dumper, basically. And a lot of the close-ups are exposition, but also I feel it adds a lot of suspense. And the use of close-ups specifically adding suspense, and you really have to watch it with a purpose to find it, because we're often so focused on the action sequences, but in terms of like, this builds suspense, how do you do that to reach the climax? I feel like most of Frodo and Gandalf's interactions are all close-ups, and it's super zoomed in on Ian McKellen's face when he's given that like it's heard its master's call, and you're pooping your pants. Sorry, children listening.
PG-13.
PG-13. That's my only.
It's a PG-13 movie, so
Yeah. And then close-ups on Aragorn and Boromir. The facial expressions really builds that, and that's what's important about watching the extended version. Is there's more Aragorn and Boromir's relationship, and just the subtle facial expressions they give each other. That would be one important use of the close-up. Gandalf versus Saruman, when Saruman is playing his hand and trying to convert Gandalf to the evil cause, it zooms in super close to Christopher Lee's eyes and his gnarly eyebrows. I think that's awesome. There's so much I could say. Mm-hmm. I feel like Peter Jackson will zoom in to have you focus on what he wants you to see. So the ring wraiths chasing the hobbits at the beginning zooms into super close facial expressions. Aragorn and the prancing pony, like it zooms into his eyeballs as it glares off of his cigar. Like that's how he builds the suspense, and I think that adds to like the horror elements, which I'll probably get into later. But yeah,
with that zoom, the only time I ever saw Legolas look scared was the Balrog demon. And he knew who it was, and Peter Jackson zoomed in on his face. And it's the first time I never noticed this. The other times I watched this movie, I looked at it this time and I thought, my gosh, Legolas actually looks scared. Like there's no way to defeat this. This foe is beyond all of us. So it just was kind of that, oh man, if the elf is scared, we better get out of here.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of Legolas, as a kid, anytime there is, well, not as a kid, because I grew up in Arizona, but like, I guess when I was like early 20s, so still kind of a kid, anytime there was a fresh snow, I would try and walk on the fresh snow like Legolas, where he doesn't sink in. I would just like step out. I'm like, I got this. Oh no, actually, I do have weight. Darn it. But as we're here talking about like close-ups, I was going to save this for later, but it kind of makes sense. So the ring itself, I understand in the book it's quite a bit more Sauron than it is in the movie, but the ring is like completely English teacher, help me out.
Anthropomorphic.
I wrote it down and I even like had to pronunciate anthropomorphic.
Thanks, Sean.
Anthropomorphic.
Yes. There you go.
It has like a personality of its own. And they do a ton of close-ups on that ring to kind of show it influencing other people, like the Council of Elrond, when it has the reflection of everyone fighting, like the ring itself is controlling that. I love the scene where, it's Bilbo. When Bilbo leaves his home and he drops the ring on the ground, he like holds it up and his hand is almost like at 90 degrees, and the ring is like clinging onto him. It looks like it's clinging. And
it's so heavy. The burden is so heavy.
But when it hits the ground, like the sound effect and then the close up to just that thud, like it has emotional and physical weight to this thing.
Yes.
And I love throughout, like you can hear like those little whispers every single time it's like influencing someone, and it is a character unto itself, and it gets the close up treatment in the same way that
it does. Every hand that reached for it and got close to touching it, there was a little sound and a pull and just a 2-3 second like hand moving slowly, and they never got to touch it, which is why it goes back to hearken to where Gandalf wasn't actually picking up the ring when he's sitting at the fire. He waits, and Bilbo just comes, or Frodo comes in and just picks it up.
Yeah,
and Gandalf smiles because it's like, now I don't have to touch it. So I kind of feel like,
see, I almost took that more of like Bilbo or Gandalf doesn't trust himself because he himself is so powerful, so he doesn't want to be tempted.
He doesn't. Yep.
And I almost saw him as like sad when Frodo came in and picked up the ring, almost like, oh no, like he has picked up the mantle unwillingly. Yeah.
All right,
but
my turn.
I love that scene. Sorry,
Craig.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Okay, you guys picked out a lot of stuff that I was going to pick out as well, but I want to start with composition because I thought there was some amazing composition at the beginning of the film where Galadriel's doing the exposition about how they got the rings. It's starting with you have the triangle of the three elves standing, so they're not like Galadriel is in the foreground, so she's the only one in focus, which I thought was really interesting, especially because she's obviously the most important to our story, and she's the only one of those, I'm assuming, that remains the ring's keeper to this point. You also have, I think what's really interesting is that the men ring bearers who become the ring wraiths are kind of in a V shape with the Witch King right in the middle. Like they're the only ones that kind of have an aggressive stance as they're being shown. Because you also see the dwarves, and they're very circular, and it's top down, bird's eye view, and that they're very much unity for that. Justin, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. While we're on the topic, Andrew, our resident Lord of the Rings expert, why were different races given different amounts of rings? Like, why did the men get the most?
There were just more kingdoms of men than there were dwarf kingdoms. They were all designed to corrupt and take power, basically corrupt the minds of all. But dwarves are basically, we don't care that much. We just want to dig for metal, and that's really all dwarves cared about. Humans, they gave more rings. There's more kingdoms, and men are the most susceptible to falling for the power. And the elves, that was like the first batch. The three rings were the first batch, and there was really only like three big elf kingdoms at the time.
Gotcha.
And what was I going to say? Yeah, so men are super susceptible to it, which is why the hobbits are basically the best ring bearers, is because the hobbits don't really care. And when Sam gets I know I'm jumping the gun, and this is lore, not movie, but when Sam gets the ring from Frodo in Return of the King, he gives it back to Frodo because he's basically just like, I don't care about power. I just want to go home to the Shire and garden and drink beer, and that's basically what the hobbits are all about. That's why
all
they're
I've
so
ever
resistant.
wanted.
There you go.
I might be a hobbit.
Sorry, Craig, for the interruption.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm going to have a lot of my lore questions answered.
This is why Andrew's here. But continuing with the composition, the Council of Elrond is also circular, which I thought was interesting.
Yes.
So basically, everyone has equal standing as far as the members go. I love that you brought up the reflection in the ring. I had that too, Justin. As far as camera work goes, tons and tons of close-ups. Extreme close-up on Galadriel's eyes when she talks about when he was seeing the eye. I thought that was a great shot. Lots of forced perspective.
That scared me.
Yeah, no, it's great. This is, I think, the thing that I think is genius. And Andrew, you mentioned this too, like that Jackson used CGI sparingly. A lot of the effects, as far as differentiating the heights of the different characters, is done just from forced perspective. I mean, that's why he's doing, Gandalf and Frodo's face, so he doesn't have to show that one is significantly taller than the other. But he's also using, extreme high angle and extreme low angle to kind of show them at different heights, where you kind of take on, you feel like you're looking down on Frodo because the camera is looking down on him, for instance. So I thought that was just used in a genius way for the cinematography.
Amazing though.
The scene where Bilbo is serving Gandalf at the table.
Yeah. The fact that they are not the same, or that they are roughly the same size in real life, you never second guess that. Nope. In the movie. I don't even think it's
they're not squeezing that out. That's just a child actor from a different side, right? That wasn't.
They used lots of different things because there was body doubles too.
Yeah.
But it's all done so well that it's so seamless. I don't even think it's to tell the Two Towers. It's the scene where Merry and Pippin the Rohirrim are attacking the orcs, and Merry and Pippin are running away. That is the first time where I'm just like, oh, that looks fake. Everything else is flawless.
The first time the Fellowship all stands together, I think that's
you really have to look.
The short guys in the front.
That
pushes it for me.
You really got to look, but if you really look, you can see it. Like when they enter Lorien or Lothlorien, the forest of Galadriel, you can see that doesn't look like Pippin. Like you can tell it's a kid. When they go to Bree, there's a super fat hobbit, and it's that's supposed to be Sam, but he looks too fat for that.
The proportions are off.
I saw one.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, just in watching it yesterday, I saw one that I had never seen before. After Frodo gets stabbed by the cave troll in Balin's tomb, he's laying face down on the ground, and Aragorn crawls on all fours to turn him over. and right before he turns him over, it's a wooden doll, and I had never noticed that until last night. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
No, that was one I picked out too. Is like when after he gets stabbed a lot in this, by the ring wraith, and then he's being carried on horseback to Rivendell. It's like very clearly like a doll on that horse, with Liv Tyler. Like it's not moving in the way a human would move.
Yeah.
I have two more. This is what happens with
This is an epic tale. This is how.
Sorry, Craig.
Hey, this is a 3 hour 48 movie. It's going to be a 3 hour 48 minute podcast.
No kidding. All right, here's my last two, and then we'll talk about
I'm
the
gonna
sound.
need an intermission.
Stop it, Justin. In the scene, and Andrew alluded to it earlier, the scene where Saruman kind of plays his hand with Gandalf, there are some earlier clues just based on camera, because it starts going Dutch angle, that 45-degree angle, looking at Saruman, where you're like, hey, things are not quite right. Things are a little bit off, which I noticed this time. I thought that was pretty great. And then I have to mention the dolly zoom when Frodo senses the Nazgul coming down the road.
Yes.
Just an amazing shot. Just, it's so creepy how it just kind of bends in all circular. It's very supernatural. And it's first person perspective too. Like we're looking at what Frodo was seeing. And I always loved that shot.
First time I saw that scene at home on DVD, I rewound it 3 or 4 times because I was like, what is happening here? Like I didn't have the understanding to know how they did that, and that was just so amazing to me.
Yeah.
So this gets into my earlier point in my intro. The Fellowship has all the elements of stories, including horror, and I think Peter Jackson he made a couple indie horror movies before he made the trilogy, and I feel like Fellowship is the only movie of the 3 that actually is scary. Like Two Towers and Return of the King, they're scary in that everyone's gonna die. It's the end, right? But like Fellowship is you're with your buddies and you're creeping through the woods and there's guys coming after you. Like to me, that's scarier than like all men are gonna die. So the dolly zoom, the Hitchcock zoom in the forest, them hiding under the tree with the ring wraith sniffing, and all the bugs are trying to get away because the bugs are scared of the ring wraith. I feel like that's the only movie of the 3 that really captures the horror aspect. And once they get to Moria, it's just the drums in the deep. It's super scary. And Bilbo,
or that scene where Gollum's being tortured.
Yeah, Gollum's torture scene when Bilbo's like, "Oh, my old ring, let me see that," and then like that's super scary.
The giant spider in the third one might be the scariest thing I've ever seen. That's enough for me. I can close my eyes at that part.
Sound.
All right. Sound.
Justin, sound effects, soundtrack.
Okay, so I kind of already talked about sound effects a little bit with The Ring. You did. I don't like that tone, Craig. I'm sorry. I didn't know we were on a clear regimen here.
No, we're fine.
Anyway, the sound The Ring makes anytime it is dropped or influencing anyone, it's just so cool. And then just the score in general, like Howard Shore, is that who does that?
Oh yeah,
Craig, the music. You do the music thing. I think more so than any other movie, the music influences, or the soundtrack influences what you're feeling. I can't think of a movie where the music is more influential. Like even more so than Star Wars.
Watch it.
Might be a hot take.
I agree. I mean, the Imperial March is iconic, but like the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, it's so good. It adds to all of it. It adds to the emotions, the emotionality. You got to have emotionality in your movies.
Well, even to the point where, okay, so I was like listening to the soundtrack one morning, and my 3-year-old son walks in, and the sound or the song or the track that was playing was like the Isengard theme, or like the orc theme. They kind of intermingle.
Caverns of Isengard, yeah.
Yeah, and my 3-year-old son walks in. He goes, "Ooh, that's a bad song. Ooh, bad guys," and like, just knows innately that is like for bad people.
The drums.
So
From the hots, from the mouths of babes.
yes. No, I love this soundtrack with all my heart. That's all I got there, Craig. Do you want to go next, Craig? I know we kind of shafted you earlier.
It's fine. I'll wrap. Corey, what do you got?
Well, I mean, we've kind of covered The Ring, which was Stealing My Thunder, and we talked about some parts of the soundtrack. There's only a couple songs on there that I'm like the main theme, and I absolutely love those. But I think when I look at this, I'm gonna say the sound parts that get me, anything with Gandalf. I absolutely love his voice. I love his tones. I love everything about him from start to finish in the entire trilogy. His voice and how he talks. That guy could motivate me to do anything and everything. Like, okay, we're charging headfirst into this danger. Oh, Gandalf said it. I'm going. I'm motivated just because of it. Like his. And then when he's having that heart-to-heart moments with Frodo, which is my quotes that we're going to share here in a bit, is, I mean, just how he has a softness in his voice. But then you go back to the Shire when he's yelling at Bilbo and do not take me for a conjurer of cheap tricks voice booming power, and the I don't know whether it's a dolly zoom on that or just a darkening. I watched that scene about 10 times. That voice trick they did there was amazing. And then you turn around and go back to Thou Shall Not Pass, where he's doing that yelling voice. So any part with him, his voice and vocal sounds was absolutely a tremendous part of this. And then I could have used some more conversations from Legolas. I love Aragorn's voice too, like just having him talk and yell things was amazing too. I think, but what it comes down to is just these actors embracing this role and committing to this 100% into who that character is and building that character. And I think you can't just have someone do that and build that trilogy. I mean, this was a perfect casting, everybody. Because I tell you what, could you picture Pippin's voice as Sam? No, you can't. He's too happy of a voice. It's too cheery. It's too British. You know, you can't picture him second breakfast and I'm with you to the end, Frodo. I mean, you can't see that. But, so I love it. It's great. I think they're all perfectly cast on the vocal sounds.
Andrew?
We're on sound, correct?
We are on sound, yeah.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the score? You want to talk about sound effects?
Well, like we said earlier, it's like I have nothing bad to say about this movie. Howard Shore is amazing. The soundtrack is amazing. The only thing I would add, I guess it just goes back to my previous point of building suspense. When Gandalf leaves to go investigate the ring, and Frodo goes back to his house after he's had a night out with the lads, and his door's open, and it's pitch black in his house. Just the music, the creepy aesthetic, and the music, and then Gandalf, and his hand comes out. Like, he's very good at adding to the suspense with that. And when the hobbits are in the Prancing Pony and the ring wraiths come in and the screeching of the ring wraiths,
yes.
like
so good.
It's ear piercing.
I can hear it right now.
Yeah, so you can hear it. And when the ring wraiths go into the Prancing Pony and they stab the beds, like that's like geez. All of that's good.
Yes.
When the Balrog comes out and Gandalf, I am the wielder of the secret fire. Wielder of the flame of Arnor. It's so good. Howard Shore's a genius. It couldn't be better.
You just gave me like goosebumps, and I love that scene so much.
Yeah,
yeah, and whenever Gollum is on screen, it's that creepy vibe. Him even talking. He doesn't really talk in the Fellowship, but just the voices, like Gandalf's booming voices. When Arwen, in the book it's not Arwen, it's Glorfindel. But yeah, when Arwen is like talking to the horse, her Asphaleth, and she makes it across the Bruinen and calls the water down, like all that's amazing. It's so cool.
Yes, this is a movie that's very hard to pull out specific things because it's just so great all the way through. So trying to pick out specific things is rough because it's all really good. I would just add the continual banging down the well of the skeleton that Pippin drops. It just keeps going, and seeing the behind the scenes stuff of how they made that looked like they had quite a bit of fun making that. So great. But yeah, the soundtrack, like I'm gonna have a hard time saying that Howard Shore did a better job than John Williams did, but it's right there. Like that might be one in one A.
I said it. I said it, right?
You can say it. That's fine.
Hate mail. Do it.
That's fine. I will say that when I teach kids about leitmotif, there's a great video Nerdwriter did on YouTube that I show them that illustrates what Howard Shore did, because it's fantastic. Especially, I mean, you've got the Shire theme, which immediately is upbeat and joyful, and like you guys can hear that right now. I know you can. The Fellowship theme though is just so good, and it's so versatile that sometimes it's kind of sad and melancholy, and then when it comes in triumphant, like when you see them coming up the hill together, like all 9 of them there, it's fantastic. Or when they swing in like a battle scene, like, yes, let's go do this. I'm ready to go and kill some orc. That's so good. Justin, you mentioned the Uruk-hai theme is great. Even the Rivendell theme is super mysterious and just it absolutely adds tons and tons of layers to the scenes and pulls you in. It helps with the immersion of that. I did want to point out that there is some diegetic music. Thankfully, much less than there is in the book, because that is one of the surprising things for those of you who have not read Lord of the Rings. If you go back and read it, you're like, why is everyone singing? Because there's a lot of singing as they're walking, because there's also a lot of walking. But you do start, with Gandalf singing, the road goes ever on and on. You've got the Hobbits drinking song in there, the Wood Elves singing as they're walking through the forest.
That song puts me to sleep, that Wood Elf song.
Yeah.
That is sleepy time music. No, it's not bad. It's not boring. It's just calming.
Yeah. Aragorn singing the what is it, the Song of Beren and Luthien, which I understand Viggo Mortensen actually co-wrote that song that he's doing, which it's fantastic. But I mentioned this too, that the Galadriel voiceover at the beginning, that just, when I saw that he had used that, I thought that was just such a brilliant way to bring in the audience, because yes, there's a ton of world building that has to be done. And if you've not read the books, you don't have any clue that this is the Third Age, and there's a massive history to this universe. I mean, it goes on. I counted this time. It's 7.5 minutes, which is a long stinking time. But I'm not bored at any point. I'm just like, yes, please tell me more. Thank you. That's wonderful. Same thing with Elrond recounting how Isildur didn't, he's like, throw it into the cast it in the fire or whatever, and he refuses. Flashbacks sometimes are overused and lazy, but here it was like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted to see and exactly what I wanted to hear.
I'm always so surprised when I watch the movie, because I always remember that being in the prologue, the part where Elrond is telling him to throw it into the fire.
Me too.
And then every time the prologue's over, I'm just like, but we skipped that part. Oh, it's later.
Yeah. Well, I think in the movie, yeah, absolutely, the prologue is the perfect hook, because you get arguably the most epic battle of like all Lord of the Rings. You could argue Helm's Deep, you could argue Minas Tirith, but like the War of the Ring, the Last Alliance, that's the biggest in terms of scale. So we don't really, we get a little bit of that. But if you know the lore, it's such a huge epic battle, and having Galadriel like voicing the exposition over that is just perfect.
Well, I guess they, if you guys ever watch movies on Prime, I really like it because it gives you like little show notes on the side. I guess originally they actually had Gandalf do the prologue, but they decided that Galadriel probably would have been the only one like alive during that time or there during that time.
Yeah.
So they went with her. One more thing for me. Well, I don't want to end it for you guys, but for me on sound is the part where All Men Cried, where Boromir dies. The music, as he's fighting off, like protecting their getaway, as he's fighting them off, the music is like swelling and it's building up, and then he gets hit with an arrow, and boom, immediately all the music stops, and like it makes you feel the emotional impact of that moment. And then between the first and second arrow, it's about 7 seconds, and the music starts to swell again, and then the second arrow hits and it immediately stops again. And I don't recall if it does it for the third arrow, but it like the stopping of the music corresponds with that arrow hitting so well that it leaves such an emotional impact on the viewer as well. And just poor Boromir. That poor guy. He just wants to make his dad happy.
Don't even get me started on Boromir.
I didn't like him.
Oh,
I'm kidding. You can't help but root for him at the end.
The
Yeah.
pressure he's
Most
under.
likable character.
I tell you this, the thing about Boromir is that I absolutely love this, and I did not know this and catch on to this till it was on TV last week. I was watching The Martian, and Sean Bean is in The Martian.
Yeah.
And there's a reference to the Project Elrond in the
Mhm.
Martian movie, and Sean Bean is in Project Elrond. He's in that scene, and he's also in the Martian scene when they're talking about Project Elrond. And so it was kind of a great little like tagline, like he's sitting at the table in that scene, and he's sitting in the Council of Elrond. So it was a great little, I don't know, just a nugget behind the scenes
That's
that
fun.
everybody, deep
Does-
fans like us.
Does he die in The Martian?
No.
No, he does not. He's
that's
playing
not a
golf
true
at
Sean
the
Bean
end.
role.
No, it's not. It's a good movie. It's a great movie. We should do that at some point.
He gets fired.
so
That's like dying.
He gets to go play golf. It's fine.
That's true.
So, Ed, performance. The one thing I want to say from the top, and then I'll let you guys jump in with your bits of dialogue, because I think we can all agree that the acting is fantastic in this. It's just wonderful. Which it would have to be to sell this ridiculous, fantastical world. The performances would have to be just top notch. The thing I noticed this time that I thought was I'd never noticed before is that when the elves talk, they have this like echoey, kind of otherworldly sound when they're speaking. It's just a cool little touch.
Is that just the Wood Elves or all of the elves?
I think it might just be the Lothlorien elves. Legolas doesn't do it, but when they're in Lothlorien, it's thing.
Like, sorry, I'm blanking. Can you elaborate?
So who's the guy who says, because one of my favorite lines is, if the dwarf breathed so loud we could have shot him in the dark.
Oh, I love that guy.
Haldir of Lorien.
Haldir. That's one of my favorite lines. I
He's
love
so
that. That's a bonus one.
Sarcastic.
Breathed so loud we could have shot him in the dark. Okay. Lines of dialogue. So we're just going to go like a couple. We'll start Justin, Corey, Andrew, me.
Movie.
I know. So
Okay.
Justin, give me one.
Okay. Well, just
Just
why
one
are
to
you looking at
start.
me like this. All right. I say this at least once a week. Andrew, you hear me say it often. I'm old. I know I don't look it, but I'm beginning to feel it in my heart. I feel thin, stretched. I feel like butter spread over too much bread.
But
Oh, I feel that every day. I'm old.
Corey.
I don't know. I just
All right. Oh,
Bilbo's an entire mood. I love that man.
Yeah. Yes.
I am going with this, and it's somewhere. At some point, I'm going to have a microphone in my hand. I'm going to have a speech where I can give this, and it's Bilbo's speech. I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. Like, it throws everybody off. I love that dialogue. I love his delivery. I love that line. It is the absolute best. I love some of you and slap some of you in the face.
Yeah.
It characterizes Bilbo so well in contrast to the rest of the hobbits.
to add to that, in the actual lore, in the book, he only invites exactly 50% of the Shire to his birthday party.
Oh, even better.
The rest of them. He briefly mentions that. Right? Who says? Is it Frodo that says that?
Frodo tells Gandalf he invited half of the Shire.
Yeah,
and the other half.
The other half showed up anyway. Yeah. Andrew, do you have a favorite line from the movie, or one of your many favorite lines?
Just one?
We'll just start. We'll do a couple rounds.
All right. Well, it's probably a tie because they're basically they're very similar. When Aragorn is talking to Frodo at Amon Hen at the Seeing Seat, and then when Boromir is talking to Aragorn. So I'm going to get a twofer, even though you only said one.
That's
when
fine.
Aragorn tells Frodo, would you destroy it? And he's like, I would have gone with you to the end into the very fires of Mordor. And then when Boromir is dying and says, I would have followed you to the end, my brother, my captain, my king, is so powerful. And I think Boromir's death, like we often think, oh yeah, he saved Merry and Pippin. That's good. But I think Boromir's death in that line convinces Aragorn to actually take up his mantle of king. Because if he can convince Boromir, who's basically the leader of the Gondorian armies, to follow him, then he can convince anybody. And so when Boromir is like, I would have followed you, my king, he's like, all right, I guess I got to do this now.
Yeah. That's
Andrew,
a great take, because earlier he says, Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king. So he's done a 180 on that. So I think that's an excellent read on that.
It's what makes Boromir the most relatable character, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, sure. What would the rest of us have done? Yeah, probably what he did. I'm going to pull out an earlier one where Gandalf pulls Sam into the window and says, "What did you hear? Speak." And Sam says, "Nothing important. That is, I heard a good deal about a ring and a Dark Lord and something about the end of the world. But please, Mr. Gandalf, sir, don't turn me into anything unnatural." It's like you heard literally everything.
I also love how the hobbits are all just like slightly scared of Gandalf. Like you get that throughout the film that they like respect him, but they're like, I don't really know what this guy can do.
No.
Yeah.
And they're very nosy people.
I have to jump in. I have to say another one because Corey mentioned it earlier when Gandalf is talking to Frodo in Moria. When I first saw the movie as a child, I absolutely identified with Frodo when he's like, "It's a pity Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance." It's like, heck yeah, kill Gollum. Who cares? But then when Gandalf is like, "No, he was meant to have the ring. Bilbo was meant to have the ring. You're meant to have the ring," and that's an encouraging thought. Like, there's more to work in this world than just evil. Like, it's easy to see evil, but like, there's something that's pulling you, Frodo, and you're meant to destroy this.
That whole scene, that whole 5-minute dialogue is where there is so much wisdom in this movie. And I feel like you get it there. Everything else you have to pull out. Boromir's redemption arc, I think, Aragorn's rise to power arc, all of those arcs you have to pull out. But that is just where the wisdom is flat out said and spoken in 5 minutes of dialogue, because that's my next quote was when Frodo said, "I wish it need not have happened in my time." And Gandalf says, and I think I have thought about this line so many times in my life since this movie, where Gandalf says, "So do I, and so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." Where life is 98% reaction. Just reacting to what's going on, and just all you get to do is decide how you're going to react and what you're going to do with it. So there's so much wisdom in that.
Yeah. I even have another bit from that.
Is that in the book or is that a Peter Jackson?
No, that's in there. That's in there.
Oh.
So one of my favorite lines come from that little talk between Gandalf and Frodo too. And I wrote it down as he said it, so it might not be word for word, but he said, "Do not be so eager to deal out death and judgment. Even the very wise cannot see both ends." And I think that so regularly that I just like make snap decisions on people. And I feel like as a teacher, we have to do that often. You make snap decisions on coworkers, you make snap decisions on students. And then as the year progresses, you learn that, oh, I should not have made those assumptions. Like Gandalf says, like even the very wise cannot see both ends.
Yeah.
What Corey said, that whole conversation is just so deep.
Yeah. And I know I'm jumping the gun, but it echoes. It's like poetry. It rhymes. In Return to the King, when he's talking to Pippin, and Pippin's like, "We're gonna die, aren't we?" And Gandalf's like, "Yeah, but it's just another path, man. We'll go on. It's so good."
All right, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm gonna throw. We're running a little shy on time, so I'm gonna throw my last one out, and then we're gonna move to the next part. I love the end of the film where Legolas says, first, that's the whole last conversation. Says, "Hurry, Frodo and Sam reach the eastern shore," and then he takes a beat and says, "You mean not to follow them?" And Aragorn says, "Frodo's fate is no longer in our hands." And then Gimli kind of there's the down note. It says, "Then it's all been in vain. The fellowship has failed." And Aragorn has this amazing speech where he says, "Not if we hold true to each other. We will not abandon Merry and Pippin to torment and death. Not while we have strength left. Leave all that can be spared behind. We travel light. Let's hunt some orc." And I'm getting chills right now. I'm like, heck yeah, let's go do this right now. Just what Gimli's all of us at that point. Yes! And you're like, okay, because it does end on a cliffhanger, but it's also like, oh yes, I'm pumped as I'm walking out of the theater.
I know the next one's going to start epically. Yep.
Yeah, and it does.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It literally hits the ground running with those guys.
Well, my first reaction is, why don't you go help Frodo? Frodo's going into hell, basically, so why aren't you going with Frodo? But Aragorn knows that he can't follow Frodo because he will fall to the power of the ring. And Merry and Pippin are about to get eaten alive by orcs. So it's like, we have to go save them first, and maybe we'll see Frodo again one day, but we can't help Frodo any more than we already have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Andrew explained that to me the other day, because I always thought, why doesn't he go after Frodo? At least, like, provide some backup. And to reiterate what you said, it's because he's worried that he cannot protect Frodo from himself.
And then ultimately you see that in Return of the King, that the best way they can help Frodo is to be a distraction, right? So that they know that Sauron has no idea.
Yeah.
So body language, facial expressions, costumes, hair, and makeup. We're just going to kind of fly through this quick. I do want to point out just one more thing. Again, Nerd Writer, just amazing YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed to that channel, he has a great video about Ian McKellen's eyes. It's just Google that or put that in YouTube. It's fantastic because he does so much acting with his eyes. And I thought also that Elijah Woods, because there's many people that were up for this part, like his enormous eyes had to have been a big factor in casting that guy.
Yeah,
because they're just enormous, big part of his face.
There's a lot of zoomed in shots with the ring wearing him down and with his eyes. So the eyes have to be part, because you got to be able to act all that. You can't just, have someone just squint. I mean, he does such a good job.
Yeah, I think to build on what we've already kind of said, with Gandalf's extreme close-ups, when the ring specifically talks and Gandalf kind of looks at it, builds the suspense. Super close-ups of Gandalf's face with the exposition dumps. I would agree. He acts a lot with his eyes for sure. You can see the pain on his face. You can see the happiness on his face when Bilbo is, I like less than half of you as well as you like, and it zooms on him and he's smiling and smoking. So yeah, for sure.
Body language. I wrote this in here, Craig, because facial expressions. I wrote this in here because I got to point this out. That one part where I talked about Legolas showing fear when Gandalf says Balrog.
Yeah.
And the reason that stood out to me is because then when they go to the woodland elves, Legolas points out, he's the one, we finally get like a longer dialogue from him where he goes and talks about that it was Balrog that took Gandalf down. And it was kind of I felt like it was a moment in that his expression was explained. There's fear here. And he didn't just say Gandalf fell. He's like, Gandalf fell to Balrog, as if all the other elves would be going, oh, shoot, a Balrog. Oh, my gosh.
Yep.
Like,
absolutely.
You're lucky all of you are still here. And so I feel like that body language and facial expression he did has a payoff. I love that payoff. It always comes back, and they do it in the woodland by having Legolas explain that, not Aragorn or someone else.
That's nice. I like that. I wanted to say, too, just how much I appreciate how much Gandalf's look is completely authentic to everything we'd seen in illustrations. Like, he looks like he stepped right off the pages of the book with his pointy hat and the beard and the cloak and all of those things. The Sauron costume this time just really struck me as just so impressive. It's just amazingly detailed and and then the Nazgul armor is kind of a derivative of that. I thought that was kind of a cool take. That it looks like it's made from the same material. So
just the extreme attention to detail on all of the costumes. Like, there's a lot of continuity errors in this thing. But that aside,
What are you talking about?
Time travel?
There's a lot of like, oh, this person's holding a shield in this scene, and the next scene he's not holding a shield, or
come on now,
Andrew, there are mistakes in this
that's
film.
Not a continuity error. Like that's just like a slight oversight.
I mean,
that's continuity. That's what that is.
Listen,
it
Frodo
depends though how they're
off, and then in the
how they're editing though.
He's got it back.
They might not be editing for. They're not editing for that kind of stuff. They're editing for like emotional takes too. I've heard that's an intentional choice that you're looking at. Maybe the performance that I got from the actors was more what I was looking for. So
I wasn't digging the movie. I have nothing negative
Justin,
to say.
It's fine.
Why you hate this movie?
I feel a little picked on. I love this movie. I love it so much. I just wanted to say I liked all the costumes, and I think they were wonderful. We've talked about in other episodes that I like movies where costumes feel lived in, and this feels lived in. It looks like Gimli has like fought in that armor. It looks like Strider has been on the road for weeks. Like, it looks real.
We also got to highlight the costumes for the orcs, because I'm going to tell you, they are tremendous. A lot of those orcs look the same, so I don't know if they use the same guy for multiple shots, but their costumes and everything, how dirty they look and filthy they look and greasy, and oh my gosh.
It doesn't look like a guy in a mask either.
No,
like,
it
that looks
not.
like an actual creature.
There's a famous internet picture of the guy who shoots Boromir standing outside the lot with some little kid. I think it was a cast member's daughter, who's probably 10, standing next to this giant orc of a man, and they're all smiling. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then in the movie, they do it so well. Those costumes, those makeup. And then the last thing I'd point out on costumes, can Frodo's fingernails be any more disgusting?
Especially with all
notice
the
that too.
close-ups
They're
on it.
short.
Yeah.
If they're
They're
long,
close-up.
they're gross, but they're very short.
He must have sat there and just chewed on those all the time. No one bought clippers for the poor kid. I mean, it was... And I don't know if those were his actual fingers or if they looked and found someone, but he has golem fingers. I mean, that is just... they're filthy.
Do you guys remember 2015, 2016, there was talk about oh, how do we enhance the movie-going experience? And they talked about adding smells to films.
Oh.
And every time I heard that, I'm like, oh, I just thought of the orcs, and I'm like, nah,
this
I'm good.
movie would stink. Yeah.
No, I do not
So,
need a smelly movie.
My only thing, I guess, for costumes, hair, and makeup, the prosthetics, the use of, again, going back to the sparing use of CGI with the use of practical effects and prosthetics, that will always and forever be superior to just pure CGI. My biggest complaint about modern movies is hey, let's green screen. Even The Hobbit, even Peter Jackson's The Hobbit is all green screen. It's all CGI, and it looks awful. So sparing use of CGI with prosthetics. The orcs are all prosthetic. The Hobbit's feet, it's all prosthetic. A lot of the stuff is prosthetic, and that is the way to go. It costs more, but see, the prices for CGI these days are so high. Yep. It seems like this would be cheaper. So yeah, practical effects all the way.
I think for an actor, you get a better role out of them. They act better because they see actual things versus just a green sheet.
Yeah.
If you listen to our Aquaman episode, you can hear how much I love CGI sunsets.
Oh,
that's true.
And The Hobbit does a lot of those.
Yeah.
I love The Hobbit. Okay. Setting the design. We've talked about a lot of this stuff already, honestly. Obviously, we've talked about New Zealand. It was filmed in various locations across New Zealand. I love the fact that Hobbiton is essentially a real place, that they actually built that. That's amazing. And then, we talked about this difference in scale, that I think it's that the hallway there, they built 2 versions of it. That's how you get there's a bigger version that Ian Holm as Bilbo walks through, and then there's a different one that Ian McKellen walks through. It's identical except for the scale, and that's why it looks small for Gandalf and bigger for Bilbo. It's just another, again, practical effect instead of doing a CGI thing.
Yeah.
In terms of CGI, though, the Balrog, every time I watch this, I try and find fault with how he looks, and he is flawless. I don't think they could do a better job today. He looks amazing.
Oh yeah, fantastic! Great detail.
Yeah. I'd say this has got to be, of all the movies of all time, #1 movie in world building. I mean, the entire world that they build and travel through the whole trilogy. Yeah. I mean, it's even Star Wars with the galaxies and worlds they go to does not match this level of world building.
Well, I would say, that connects to set decoration too. Everything in Bag End looks used, right? And that's a place I would want to visit there. There's books and papers everywhere. The food, it looks delicious. I bet that place actually probably smells good.
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah, I love the circular doorways. I mean, because I remember that there's the very famous line. I think it's from The Hobbit. I think it's from The Hobbit. He lived in a hole in the ground, but not a dirty, filthy hobbit. That's The Hobbit, right? Not
that's
not Fellowship. But it's that image of he lives in a hole in the ground because it's circular or whatever, and it's that's just their architecture they have. That's the way they do.
Yeah. I was racking my brain for critiques of the Fellowship because I didn't want to just praise it all night. The one thing I would critique is, in the books, when Frodo gets the ring from Bilbo, he doesn't actually leave the Shire for a very long time, a decade. And that in that time, Gandalf is traveling all over trying to figure out if this is the One Ring or not. So my one critique is when Gandalf goes on his journey, it shows Minas Tirith. You don't know what that is yet if you don't know the lore. And it's where's that? What is that? And then he goes to Isengard. You don't know where that is. So that was a critique, is you don't really know where these things are, but as you watch the trilogy, you learn to know where they are. But which is another critique against that Ebert review where it's I think Justin mentioned it at the beginning, is like, oh, it leaves on a cliffhanger. It's like, no, it doesn't. Not if you know
Not
the
really.
story.
Yeah, that's true. I remember
guess
thinking
when I first saw it, I was really disappointed, not knowing. Like I had seen trilogies before, but they're always self-contained. But yeah, as it just ends with Frodo and Sam walking, and I'm like, what's going on? Hey, I want more. I didn't know that as a kid. I didn't read it until after watching it.
But yeah, that was my one thing, is like, you don't know, and that's a rings of power critique I have, is they fast travel, and when Gandalf is doing his thing, he fast travels, and it makes it seem like Frodo's had the ring for like a couple days, but in the book he's had it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Passing of time is not always clear in that movie.
Yeah.
So we're running really long on time, so I'm going to kind of fly through a couple of things. We mentioned, as far as props, the One Ring, of course. I love that the Red Book of Westmarch is in this. That's just cool because it's essentially a frame story. I want to skip. Oh yeah, let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about that. For characters, what I found that there's in another universe, there's an absolutely bonkers version of this movie as far as cast goes. Because yeah, Elijah Wood could have been Jake Gyllenhaal, which that's fairly normal. But we could have had, Ian McKellen obviously plays Gandalf. Sean Connery was approached but said no, which is kind of sad. Patrick Stewart turned it down. Those are both kind of make sense. You see either of those guys doing that.
No.
But when you start getting to like Viggo Mortensen, we almost got Daniel Day-Lewis, turned it down, but Nicolas Cage was offered to play. Yes, please. I would like that.
Are you serious?
No.
I'm serious.
No. You just said how much you hated, what was it,
Bonkers.
Face Off.
That's a different thing. Okay,
you
so
want
we got
Nicolas Cage as
no. Hey,
Aragorn?
this is I want the most bonkers version ever. So you got Nicolas Cage as Aragorn. We're gonna have James Corden playing Samwise. We're gonna have Bruce Willis playing Boromir because that was a possibility at one point.
Nice.
For Frodo. I mean, what are you gonna do?
I mean, now, yeah, and then and here's another one. I'll just throw out. Helena Bonham Carter expressed interest in playing Arwen. I mean, like,
oh god,
I hate
I
this
think
so
the
much.
cast we got was so good and so pitch perfect. And even though you have a mix of American and English actors, and even the American actors doing English accents pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an American saying that. Kate Blanchett is Galadriel. Yes, please. So good. Just everybody, I think, is fantastic in this.
I'm just gonna say it. I don't like Frodo. That's my
you
one.
would
Like,
say that. You would say that.
I don't like Elijah Wood in this. It makes me mad.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
because when you reach a certain level of maturity, Justin, you realize that Frodo, he's not Bilbo, bro. Bilbo went on his journey voluntarily. Frodo was thrust into this thing. He had no choice.
That's
I don't
right.
want him to be Bilbo. I just, man, like, have some caffeine or something. Wake up, be happy, man.
I think it's great. He's got the ring, man. That's a lot of responsibility.
I know. He's just so fussy all the time.
Which brings us to Hero's Journey. This is an absolutely perfect example of the monomyth. It's one I talk about in class. Like, absolutely, Frodo's a reluctant hero. It's thrust upon him. You have Death of the Mentor. You've got Death and Rebirth. You've got Meeting with the Goddess. You've got all of the steps. It is an absolutely perfect one, as is The Hobbit, which is kind of interesting. They both fit that cycle.
The one thing I would add about that hero's journey that I wrote this down specifically was that I feel like, because knowing how the trilogy goes, having seen it before and then going back and doing a rewatch here, the building of the hobbits through the whole thing starts out very slow. First, they're just running. As they leave the Shire, they're running through a field, very low risk, but they're having to run and hide. Then they get into the forest. There's some danger coming. They don't know what it is. They're hiding under tree roots. And so it's kind of a building of their ability and their grit to this task. They didn't just go start walking into Mordor. No. One does not simply just walk into Mordor. You have to build your abilities as you go. And so I feel like
you got to level up.
You got to level up. And so they go from running in the cornfield, running in the forest and hiding, and then taking off, and then going to the town where Aragorn is, Strider, and they're walking into the bar, and it's very untrusting, and it's kind of weird and bizarre. Like, everything they do has been out of a comfort zone of a hobbit. And it builds that hero. It's a hero's journey of developing them along the way beyond all of just the hero's journey arc. And I thought it was tremendous how they do it. They did not waste the time to just kind of skip ahead. They did this methodically. So that's why I don't think they could ever make this anymore. They would turn this into a season-long show in 9 episodes and have some fillers, and it would be terrible.
Yeah. Corey, that's a great reminder too for our audience that the hero's journey is not just a physical journey from point A to point B, that it is very much a developmental journey, internal journey of the characters turning into the hero they
their stamina, their fellowship of each other, everything.
Leveling up, as Justin said too.
Yeah,
that's great.
And they each have their own idiosyncrasies when you look at it. Yeah, like they all grow over time, but like they each have their own challenge they must overcome. You know, Pippin, as Galadriel says, like, you will find your courage, and like he's the scaredy cat, but he eventually like overcomes that. And Sam, his loyalty to Frodo is tested, and obviously Frodo has to deal with the greatest evil, and he fails, but Sam is there to save him. So yeah, it's like they all have their own individual hero's journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we talked about world building at length, so I think we can move to final thoughts. And Andrew, I'm going to give you first crack.
Oh, I wrote one question. Director cameos, yay or nay?
I'm good with it as long as it doesn't...
not distracting.
Yep, agreed.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Craig.
So you're good in it?
Yeah, blink or miss.
He's in Bree. He's eating a carrot as the hobbits are walking up to the hotel.
Yep, in the rain.
Very big carrot.
And he burps. And he's in every one. He's in the Two Towers. He's on an Oliphant, I think. And in Return of the King, he's one of the Corsairs that Aragorn kills. He gets shot by an arrow. And his children, his son and daughter are in all of them as like 5-year-old kids.
Oh. I feel like as a director, you've like earned the right to be in your own film as long as they don't go out of the way to point it out.
But what about like M. Night Shyamalan? Is that going too far?
It depends. I mean, it's Alfred Hitchcock did it. If Alfred Hitchcock does it, then it's okay.
It's allowed.
But again, he's doing it in a very subtle way.
Yeah. All right. And then my final thought would be you all need to name your favorite characters and why. Mine is Boromir because he is the most relatable. We're all human men, and he falls from grace and he redeems himself. And I feel Aragorn is I don't want to take anyone's thunder, but Aragorn is the perfect man who we all aspire to be, but Boromir is the real man who we all are.
Nice. Mic drop. I'm going to go Legolas because he goes God mode because I know that irritates you, Andrew.
He is so overpowered, but I love it. I love Legolas.
I do. I love that scene where he's just like shooting like 7 guys in a row, just standing over on the left-hand side. Great, just one shot too of it, just wide, just bang, 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 bang.
Aragorn's wrestling on the ground while he kills like 7 of them.
Yeah, that's fun. Justin, Corey,
I don't know if I can choose a favorite.
Gandalf, absolutely Gandalf.
Yeah, maybe Gandalf.
His whole arc, dying, coming back, and his wisdom he imparts. I'm all about movie and wisdoms now.
Well, if we're going with the whole trilogy, I'm going to say Grima Wormtongue. I love that guy.
No, Fellowship characters, the 9 Fellowship members.
All right, Gandalf then. How did we not talk about
Gandalf already got chosen? You got to pick a different one.
He just took my turn, though. That's not fair. No, you guys already took the good ones.
Were you talking about Wormtongue stabbing Saruman?
When we get to that movie.
Oh man, okay, yeah.
I know. Corey could not stop watching once he watched this one.
I couldn't. I burned through all 3 and just wrapped it up last night.
Yeah,
nice.
Couldn't help myself.
Great movies.
How have we not talked about like the poetic nature of the way they talk? I feel like we should have talked about that during dialogue. But every time they're monologuing, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, they say Mordor. They roll their R's.
Sound like Gimli.
No, you're right, though. It's Tolkien, bro, and that's what separates it from Rings of Power. Sorry, Rings of Prime. Rings of Prime doesn't talk like that, so it doesn't feel Tolkienian.
Yeah.
Ooh, good choice. Other final thoughts before we get out of here?
I don't think I have anything else to say.
Top movie of all time, top trilogy.
It's definitely in my top 3 movies of all time, for sure.
The problem is it's not a movie that you can, well, maybe you, but it's not the kind of movie where I can watch it over and over and over and over.
Oh no, I could.
I can
totally
watch
can
it
do that.
and then I'll
Yeah.
get in the mood and watch it. But at the same time, once I started watching Fellowship, I had to continue through. I couldn't stop.
So you just disprove that.
I
Yeah.
just
Do you guys
disprove
find
that.
too, like as you get older, like Fellowship used to be my least favorite, but as I get older, it's slowly becoming my favorite.
Yeah.
Least favorite of
Yes.
the three, I should say.
I like slower movies now than I did when I was younger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two Towers was my favorite growing up because of Helm's Deep, but as an adult, as a man, I prefer Fellowship.
Okay. On that note, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on X and Facebook. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. Support us by writing a review on your favorite podcast catcher. One last thing, our next episode will be a review of Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 1. Send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from Dune Part 1, and we'll share it on the next episode.